My whole family has a really strong work ethic. I remember how hard everyone worked. My bedroom as I was a teenager was the corridor to my dad's office. I think the first issue was that yes, lots of people have a good playbook, but if they've done it in a different way or a different company, then they need to re-engineer quite a lot of the way your company works to fit their playbook.
Where did your career begin?
So I went to Ystwyth and did software engineering in 1997, but I think before that I had two self-employed parents.
Peter Gradwell is a technology entrepreneur, somebody who I've observed from afar because we both started our internet businesses in the late 90s about the same time, and somebody I learned a lot from just by watching what he was doing. In this episode, you'll hear from Peter how his entrepreneurial parents inspired him and produced a great work ethic that he's taken into his career, and some of the obstacles he's overcome from growing a large business, hiring management teams, working with external investors, and always managing that cash flow right through to stepping away from the business he founded and the business that still carries his name. My name is Richard Osborne, and this is Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF. Peter, good to meet you, and thank you for coming on the podcast here. You're someone I've been aware of and known of from right towards sort of back end 90s as somebody who has always been an innovator and at the forefront of technology, particularly around the internet and telecoms. So it's really great to have the opportunity to chat to you. What inspired you right at the early sort of stages really to take that step? Where did your career begin?
So I went to Aberystwyth and did software engineering in 1997, but I think before that I had two self-employed parents. My dad was a early database designer, my mum was a physiotherapist and had a clinic. So kind of working for yourself was always the natural mode. So I had a few kind of sixth form, side businesses. But then when I was at university, I got into websites and website design, and I had a industrial graduate placement with a big IT services company called Logica, where I worked in the City of London in 1999, were writing software for Orange, the original mobile phone company. Um, and I discovered that I hated all that, and working for that, and that the project, maybe we'll get into that later, was particularly pointless, in my opinion. So I kind of thought, well, it's no fun sitting on the treadmill for other people. I want to go off and run my own businesses.
Okay. So when you just mentioned there you had a couple of side projects through sixth form, what sort of shape did those take?
What sort of shape did I take? I mean, I think the first one was creating business cards for people, and printing things because we had a printer. Um, yeah, and then quite quickly, I got into writing software for people, and websites and things like that. So
So you really, right at the very beginning, at that point, even whilst you're doing your studies, you was already running some, effectively running your own business, even though it may have been what today we would call a side hustle. You already had that in you.
yeah, well, I've always thought it was a good way to earn money, right? Was to sell products and to pay, for whatever it was I needed to or wanted to do. So I've always liked the. I've never been a good consultant. I don't like being paid per hour for my time. I like being paid for delivering a product because then you get the leverage, and if you get it right, you can sell more products than there are hours in the day, and that's a good way for you to make a bit more money.
So when you're talking about at that point, you mentioned your both your parents were self-employed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I picked up from that is that both your parents were their businesses were their time in that way they were selling their time. Is that correct? And could that sort of lead from where your sort of thoughts around having a product to sell comes in?
Yeah, it's probably a good one of those, sort of things that you don't think about at the time, but actually is something that left an impression on you. My whole family has a really strong work ethic. I remember how hard everyone worked. my bedroom when I was a teenager was the corridor to my dad's office. So I kind of always knew when he'd turn the light out to go to sleep. So that kind of working hard and delivering for customers was always really important for us. But yes, you're probably right. I think yeah, you could see how hard it took, how hard everyone had to work to kind of earn enough money and things, and so therefore, yeah, that idea of productizing things and creating leverage, I think was definitely something that obviously came to me. I thought I don't want to do that again. I want to try and make it bigger than that.
And this is something I've heard previously. When I think back to a previous guest, a gentleman called Dwayne Jackson, who founded Cashflow, an accounting platform, it was exactly what you're talking about. It's exactly the same as what he's mentioned in the past, and one which some people might miss is his original business, Key One, was doing software development, web and particularly website design, and he found himself in a situation where he was like, if I can build something that I can resell over and over again, that takes away the limitation of, we've all got a finite amount of time available unless we give up sleep. But even giving up sleep, you've only got so much time available. If you can find a way of commoditizing what you sell, you then have that opportunity to resell it over and over again. And that's what I'm picking up from yourself here.
I remember doing the maths in university thinking, well, obviously I've got to do my course. So then I've got the number of holidays, you get loads of holidays when you're in university, right? So I was like, I've got this many days in these holidays, this many hours. Like you said, don't need to sleep too much. So maybe I could do 12 hours a day. And then this is my hourly rate. And so therefore, in this Easter holiday, I could earn what, £4,000. And I was like, that's, I mean, that was a lot of money for a student in 1997, but it still wasn't enough in the grand scheme of things. So it was a question of, how do you break through that and how do you kind of turn that into something where you're not constrained?
Yeah. You mentioned then that you went on and worked for was it Telefonica? Did you
Logica.
mention Logica? Sorry, and started building a system there, which it became redundant. What was happening there, and what did that show you?
Yeah, so I was really lucky. I mean, Logica was one of the top IT consultancies, and I had a graduate software developer job on grade one of the ladder, and we were writing a system for Orange. So Orange had just launched their prepaid product, Just Talk, and they had a problem with their Infomix database, so that if the database crashed, when you rang up the call center in Darlington to activate your new prepaid SIM, they couldn't put the credit onto your account. So that we wrote them a system where they could kind of alt tab, change the screen, go onto our system. It looked and felt exactly the same, but actually, although it would activate the SIM on the network, so you could make your calls and texts, it wouldn't do the billing, and then they would print out a piece of paper down in the Bristol office, and then overnight, when they had spare capacity, the team in Bristol would type it back in, and they'd fix the database. The team in Bristol would type the billing information back in, and you get your credit online. And this was, I mean, it was just completely eye-opening because one is Logica charged Orange an enormous amount of money to do this, and I got a very small amount of that, of course. But then the problem with the system was that you could have spent that money on either A, fixing the database so you didn't have the problem in the first place, or B, the fact is we were kind of writing a carbon copy notepad. It was just a posh version. So we could have kind of, that would, giving every call center agent a notepad and a fax machine would have been a lot cheaper and achieved the same effort. And then to kind of add insult to injury, by the time we finished this project, Orange then changed the business logic and rewrote something else. So they canned all my year's worth of work. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. A, the thing I did was pointless in the first place, and B, they just binned it. So I don't want to do that again.
But that's where is it about that time your first idea came along to start your first, I would say, proper main business? Would that be right?
Yeah, the proper company. Yeah, so that was the start of a company called Gradwell.com, and it was 1999, and the internet boom was kind of taking off nicely, and it was all lots of exciting meetings and things happening in London about all that. And I could see all this stuff going on, and I had been, obviously, as you said, writing web pages at university, so I knew a bit about domains, and I knew that we were sending loads of money overseas to American companies who allegedly were hosting their servers, although I'm not quite sure that there was, it was much more than a computer in a garage that we were paying for. So I thought, well, I could get one of these computers and I could put it in the garage, and get an internet connection, and that's what we did. Um, and then we started selling domain names for people, like the web address www.bbc.co.uk or whatever. And so, so we started doing that, and then we sold lots of them because there was, huge amounts of people buying these domain names and starting to get online and getting their first web presence. And then, along with the domain name, we sold the website hosting package, which was £10 a month and a recurring subscription. And I think I needed 10 customers to agree to pay me £10 a month to buy the server and pay for the ongoing operating costs for the year. And that was sort of the baseline. And once I'd got that sorted, off we went. And that was the start, as you say, of Gradwell.com.
Yeah, and we started about the same sort of time in sort of the hosting platform, because it was 1998, 1999 when I started my web hosting and domain business as well. So we're both sort of starting off about that time. And I remember it was a bit like the Wild West in many regards, with a lot of what were called bedroom ISPs at the time. For me personally, I had a website called Nice Names, and at that time, I'd managed to get an online card payment process not by today's standards. It wasn't to the level you'd expect for handling card payments by today. I think I'll just stop at that and just say that was it. And people were buying domain names speculatively as well. For me personally, it was like printing money. And then, exactly as you just say, you'd pay for it. You'd have a server. It wasn't in the garage. For me, I had one server sat in a place called Telehouse down Docklands. I rented a little 1U or 2U, I think it was, a bit of rack space. And I had everything running on that one server. People's hosting, the DNS, the email, all running on one piece of kit. You just can't even imagine that today. And it was a really sort of interesting time. But for me, getting the card payment was a nightmare, and that came with its own issues as well. But you went one step beyond that, which I was really jealous of. So talk us through how Gradwell.com evolved and really sort of took off.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting, story about collecting money and cash flow and all that. So before card payments, obviously people sent us checks, because this was very much still a check-based society, and particularly in business. So we had checks, and one of the ways the way the market worked at that time was that you got your customer to pay, and you registered the domain name, and then you had a period of 30 days before you had to pay your wholesaler. And if you didn't want it at the end of the 30-day period, you could cancel it so you didn't get a bill. It's a loophole that they think they've got rid of now. But anyway, so we had the opportunity for customers to go online, buy the thing, but then send us a check. And the first memory I have of that was, like I said, I came home from my job at Logicon one Friday evening and sat down and started reconciling checks, and kind of carried on reconciling checks until I had to go back to work on Monday morning. And all these checks were for £10 each. So although there were lots of them, it was not big amounts of money. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. Got to be a better way of doing this. And then obviously, it's the thing about subscription-based economy is that every month you are ideally increasing the amount of customers you have exponentially, because each new one goes on. So the prospect of having an exponentially increasing pile of checks was not going to work for me. So I think I said I needed to have direct debit, because that's the right way to collect money for subscriptions. But at this point, I was back in Ystwyth. I went down to see NatWest Bank, I banked with. And the bank manager in NatWest in Ystwyth, which at the time had a business centre, looked at me and kind of didn't really understand what this computer science student was doing and why you needed this thing. So the thing you have to remember about direct debit is it's an unlimited liability for the bank, because I can charge you £1 million on your direct debit, and you have the right to go back into the branch the next day, and they will give you an immediate, no questions asked refund. Of course, at that point, I've probably taken the £1 million and run off to the Cayman Islands. So the bank has losing. So there's a big confidence issue for a bank to go over on that, especially if you're 19 years old. And so, and the man, I remember, he said to me, well, in my portfolio in Aberystwyth, there's 500 farmers and kind of 500 tea shops, and I'm retiring next year, so I didn't really want to rock the boat at this point. You've asked me for this very complicated thing, and I said the one thing is I have been at NatWest Bank for 50 years. I have been, writing credit and assessing risk on the bank's behalf for 50 years. So I can, if you come back with your CV and you polish your shoes a bit more and set out your business plan, explain why you want to do that. Come back next week, and anyway, the long and the short of it is that I got signed off. They sent me the piece of cardboard that they send everyone, which says, "We're the clearing bank of the United Kingdom, and you agree to indemnify us, full stop." And I thought, what the hell, nothing to lose here. So I signed that, and as you say, then eventually we got through, and that was probably the last bit of good old-fashioned banking I've ever had. But it worked, and it helped us, and off we went. And we could do electronic payments.
And that was really sort of game changing for you, where I didn't have that facility. I had card payments working with another organisation, and but then one thing that really hit me, I don't know whether you had a similar, because I had a large customer base who was speculatively buying domain names. An event happened around about 2000, I think it was, where somebody, I don't know whether it was Coca-Cola or somebody, sued to get their domain name back based on trademark. And then I had an absolute flood of chargebacks where money was basically being ripped out of the bank. And that, from a business perspective and the sort of the way the world should be, stabilized domain names and got rid of people buying all these like trademark infringing domain names. Did that impact your business at all?
I don't recall having kind of massive problems with fraud and chargebacks. I do later on we had problems with credit card fraud, and things like that. But I think maybe because we had a balanced payment portfolio, we helped. And maybe so we didn't have that sort of immediate cash flow problem. I do remember it was challenging kind of getting credit for these online businesses, and we worked with Clydesdale then, because I think someone I knew worked out that they were the soft touch in the industry, as it were. They were the most flexible for card acquiring. And the net result of that was that Clydesdale was owned by National Bank of Australia. The head of risk in National Bank of Australia realised that his figures had gone through the roof and there was something going on here. And my associate was summoned to London, where this bloke had flown in from Sydney, and had to explain the whole thing. So it was a bit touch and go, but luckily I didn't have too many credit problems back in the early days. So.
Yeah, and that's where I was just about to allude to, really, or come to, is we comparing sort of what your business as it was then to what mine was at the time. I would say you had a much more stable business where you was providing a rounded service. Sort of, you register your domain name, you have your hosting, you have your email, and you were sort of servicing businesses that had that need. For me, the mistake I made at that time was, to coin a phrase, I identified a quick buck, but that came with a risk that I didn't foresee, in that although I could do the hosting, the email, I did have a small number of business clients that I was doing websites for. I literally set up a dedicated website for people to buy speculative domain names, called Nice Names as it was at the time, because loads of people were registering these domain names. So I thought, let's get on that wave. But what happened to me was, with any quick buck, there never really is a free lunch. It almost sunk my business at that time.
Yeah, I've always, rightly or wrongly, I've always been a little bit skeptical of those sorts of opportunities. I got into voice later, and lots of people tried to buy 0900 premium numbers from us, and we never did that, because although the margin was fantastic, you always felt a little bit nervous about the risk. So I suppose I've always liked a business model which is flat and wide, with many thousands of customers spending a little bit of money, so that if something goes wrong and you piss a few off, then the business is still safe. And that became quite important as we started growing, employing people, all the rest of it. At least we could always be comfortable.
Yeah. So how did so you had this flat and wide, you had this stable business with a broad range of customers. You was building up a subscription model. You had direct debit facilities in place that were facilitating and automating that, as you can see. So how did Gradwell.com evolve and be, what were the next few years like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, they were quite busy. I finished my university degree and things. I think actually ended up divesting that kind of, my brand was called Click Names. That did go off to a company called Onyx up in Middlesbrough. But then, as you say, life moves on. I ended up in Bath, where I am now, and still doing websites and still doing website hosting because that was the kind of core profitable bit of the business. And at that point, we wanted to offer telephone support, and I had a friend who lived in Leeds and a friend who lived in Tunbridge Wells, and we wanted a Bath phone number so they could answer, but the phone would route to them. And at that point, the only way you could do it, this is now sort of 2004, I think, you could have BT, you could have ISDN, which was enormously expensive, and then you would divert the call. And the problem was that every time you received the call in and you diverted it out, you tied up two lines on your ISDN system, so you couldn't receive many phone calls. So we just thought, well, I just thought there's got to be my friend Ben, is there not a better way we can do this? And I think the other thing that happened at that time was we're starting to get broadband. So we kind of, ISDN's a 64K channel. Suddenly we had a 512K channel. So we thought, oh, we could fit a voice call down this internet connection somehow. And so we had a go. And that kind of worked a bit. It wasn't the most quality call and everything, but it did work. And so we ended up making this work. And then we built a web portal to allow people to manage the telephone numbers that they got from us and the phone calls and the telephone handsets and things. And we were able to go back and show that to the 1,000 odd customers that we had in the website hosting business. And they said, oh, that's great. We've got the same problem as you have. We love that. And so that then resulted in the launch of our kind of voice over IP and our, what you would now call it a cloud PBX, but our business phone system that ran over the internet for people. And that was really the product that then had big growth.
So that's what I find fascinating about that is, as you just said, 2004, and I remember broadband. So at that time, I was living in Luton, and there was NTL. Were just rolling out cable modems around Luton, that area, and it was changing business. And for me, I'd started to build a bit of a business model up around earning revenue on the dial-up internet. So people would dial up to a local rate phone number 0845, whatever it might be, and then I would get a share of those revenue minutes, and that funded a lot of internet companies at that time. And what I'm seeing as your business is evolving is you have your hosting, you're providing an internet service, but you're moving into a telecoms service that isn't impacted by the change of the internet, but is benefiting from the evolution of broadband as well, providing telecom services where you're building another revenue stream effectively on people, where they use their calls. You've just talked through how you're in this situation. You've got a couple of people, who you want to be able to answer calls as a business, which today, as we're talking now, is commonplace. Talk me through sort of that period, that sort of research period of time. How do you even come up with an idea? This sort of thing must be possible, and and we can build something and put a solution in place for it.
It's a very good question. I'm naturally curious as to why things don't work and and naturally impatient about the fact that things don't work and the business process should be better. I think one of the things that I mentioned, my dad was an early database designer and kind of business process things. So a lot of my life has been looking at big flowcharts or big entity relationship diagrams of companies and all the information they have and the decomposition of that and going, right, well, if you take that box there and you move it around a bit and you reorder it, then life, suddenly the process flow or the information flow that you've got there is going to be smoother or more optimum. So I've been nurtured to look at the world like that and to think about, oh, if we could do that, then wouldn't it be better? So I suppose that's a little bit of inventiveness. But I think, so I don't know why I sat there and thought that I should take on telephones, but I did. And that's the result of it. And so I'm not very good at dealing with these processes that are broken. I want to fix them. And then that kind of, luckily that helps other people, right? And other people think, oh, this is good. Well, I want to buy that.
And one of the other things which I think is important we pick up on with what you did during that time is you looked at your existing customer base, and some people may use it low hanging fruit or sort of the easy selling. It's much easier to have a new product to sell to your existing customers than it is to try and win more new customers for a new product. Was that intentional?
Yeah, this a little bit. I mean, I'm certainly a fan of that bit of marketing mantra. About getting an extra pound from existing customers. I think the other interesting thing, though, so there's an often argument between product people. Do you have the Steve Jobs approach of product, which is, or do you have the sort of consensus view where you go out and do? I, I don't. The problem I have with if you ask 1,000 people what product it is they want, they and they might not have the imagination that's necessary to see the next leap that is required, and so they will create a better, elephant or whatever it is that they talk about. Um, and whereas, you can take the Steve Jobs approach, which is, I think the world needs a better iPhone, but no one's ever thought of an iPhone before. So, and you make that quantum leap, and then you go out and show people. I'm slightly more towards the Steve Jobs end of it, and then the net result of that is I'm quite happy to cannibalize what an existing market, or to ask people what their business problem is, or observe what their business problem is, or try and observe what their problem is, and then come back to them and say, "Had you thought about this solution?" Rather than just sort of going, right, well, you've said A, B, C, D, and therefore what you need is E. Often the answer is to jump to H or J. And so that's kind of been important. Like, so, a lot of the web hosting customers had this problem with customer support and service and things, and but they would never join the dots. So that's how we kind of got into voice over IP, and we've done that a few times in the Gradwell business. We went from the websites to the domain names into voice over IP, and then we've kind of launched into broadband quite late in the day. But it was always a slight tweak on the existing market and trying to think how's this going to help the customers and solve the business problem that they have.
I love that, and I have been criticised at times for taking, to use your analogy, taking a Steve Jobs approach. The I share that same view that sometimes if somebody's in a business owner or in a situation, they only see what their issue is. And I love that analogy. They'll if you ask them what they need, they'll say, as you just said, a better elephant, or a longer saw, or whatever it might be, because they see their existing solution and the problem, and they just need a better what they have. And as said, I've been criticised at times by going off on a tangent to try and create a completely off the wall situation. But there's been times where the solution that we've put out there, like we have an advertising platform that generates revenue for people based on displaying adverts effectively within a startup journey. When I started designing that and building it to launch, our customers said I was wasting time, fix this, make this better, don't build that. Now we pay out millions of pounds a year to our customers in revenue shares that is like revolutionizing their business. But
one thing I found really hard as so the Gradwell business grew, eventually we had 70 people. I found it really hard then, because then we had some product managers and customer support managers and teams and all these, and they would come along and they said, "Well, we spent all day talking to customers, and we've done this survey, and these are the top 10 things that we need to fix in the platform, and we prioritize them like this." And they were all very sensible people, and they had the right answer. They had done their work very thoroughly, but I often felt that they'd sort of missed the point, and they weren't going to increase the business or the top line, or expand the capability. And I would come back and I say, "Oh, but I've just spoken to this customer, and we should build this feature." And they said, "But there's no evidence to that. You just had a chat, Peter." And it was always very hard to balance the thing. I think eventually we kind of ended up with some sort of truce where I would agree that they could spend so much of their time doing the obvious things that the customers obviously wanted, and then we would have an allocated amount of time where I would decide the things that we should do, and kind of keep the product innovation going effectively, I suppose. I think it's important for businesses to create that balance.
where do you draw the line, though, where if now clearly you and I were quite product driven in that sense. The but there are times from personal experience, and I'm assume you may have come across this yourself, where you find yourself in a situation where you're creating or coming up with a solution, but eventually it ends up with a solution looking for a problem because it's not been right or it's not worked. And where do you draw the line in those situations? Because we can't always get it right.
Yeah, I mean that there's the fail fast.
Or to ask it slightly differently, how do you identify if you're going down a rabbit hole that you perhaps should stop going down?
I think you have to fail fast, right? And then that's back to having some reasonably good metrics about how much money you're earning from things and whether it is going to sell and how much money you've and effort you've put into it. Um, yeah, I mean we tried to relaunch the web hosting business because the original web hosting business had then the voice over IP business had taken over and we'd left that languishing a bit. So we put a lot of time and money into rebuilding the web hosting business, but ultimately couldn't get it to fly. And that was probably a situation where we didn't let go fast enough. Um, and we kind of, yeah, probably spent a few £100,000 too many at that point trying to get it to reboot, and it didn't. So eventually we had to give up on it.
Okay. So you're in telecoms. You've rolled out a fresh new, hot off the press product on a very early doors broadband platform. The I can imagine it being quite a because it's all everything's very new. Even the foundations it's running on broadband must have been quite a sort of a bumpy start and journey. But how were the first sort of the short and medium term for that business or that part of the business?
Well, the good bit was that the phone rang off the hook and people wanted to buy it. The challenge was so my sales manager back then, Derek. You know, so the problem with the VoIP phone was that the broadband wasn't reliable, so the phone calls would keep cutting out, and the people had hitherto been used to 100% reliable phone service because it was on the copper wire. So that was always the big objection. And I do remember a kind of a series of a year or so. So there's a German manufacturer called Snom that makes these really great quality phones. And but the original Snom 90 and Snom 100, were pretty early days. So Derek had one of those. It was the best at the time. Always has always Snom have always had a premium market position. But eventually he would ring me up and go, Peter, it's not working. I can't sell this stuff. Yeah, the other phone call. And I said, don't worry, Derek. The Snom 200 is out. So let me give you a Snom 200. Another month would go by or whatever, 6 weeks, and he would say, Snom 200 still rubbish. People keep losing sales because they keep losing the calls. So I said, don't worry, the Snom 300 is. Anyway, this charade kind of carried on for long enough that we got our act together in the core software and Snom got their act together in terms of the audio stuff. And the broadband settled down so that the network latency was reliable enough. Eventually, the sales team were able to sell big quantities of this product. Yeah, but I think it took a lot. I mean, Derek and the rest of the sales team were always up for the fact that it was an early product and people wanted it, and so they always helped the customer to understand what they were getting into. But it took us a while to get everything working. Which inevitably ended up with some frustrated customers where you always get someone that rings you up and go, I've just lost £1 million deal because your phone, died on me. And it's like, well, I have a lot of empathy for that, but ultimately I was only charging you £8 a month for the thing. So you know, it's not directly my responsibility that you've lost £1 million.
The with such a sort of early doors product, is there a defining moment where or a proud moment where you sat and thought, this is really like revolutionizing, this is like I've made a difference here?
Yeah, there was a couple, yeah, because we did a bit to get working. And there was a couple. So actually, there was a company called Streetcar in London, which was one of the early car rental on the you could go up and swipe a card. And they used our phone service in the early days, and they scaled enormously. And that was really good. Yeah, I think they're now part of Zipcar and Enterprise, and so all around the country. But they were an early customer. And then we had an insurance business that was a startup in this grand office opposite Threadneedle Street, opposite the Bank of England. And there, I do remember going to help plug it all in, and there was 100 agents sat in this enormous big room with 100 VoIP phones, all plugged into their CRM or something. And the way that worked, we couldn't have made that business work without having had without the VoIP platform and without the kind of speed to market and stuff. And I did remember standing at the back of the room thinking, wow, there's 100 people here that are working, and the reason they're working, one of the reasons, is because they're using the phone system, and that's enabling them to do something they couldn't have done before. So that was great. It's really nice. I love seeing actual customers use the service and see it make a difference. So.
It sounds like, and I'm sure it would, like an amazing story of growth. That, as you've sort of been in sort of the hosting side, the internet service provision side of the business, moving into telecoms, and we're talking like thousands of users here and sort of growing significantly. Without a doubt, you would have hit growth pains during that period. What were those sort of growth pains that you sort of hit at that point, and what did it mean for you and the business itself?
So there were the sort of the usual categories of technical and people, probably, and money. I think so the first issue was that thinking about, you said about having one server in Telehouse. So I think we got to the point where we had 14 or 15 all running this VoIP platform, and it wasn't scaling well. And we knew we needed a big cluster and some new equipment and all the rest of it. So we priced up a couple of $1 million worth of HP servers, but we didn't have a couple of $1 million to spend on them. So then we went off to the bank, and we also needed people and marketing and management, and the whole thing kind of needed a bit of organization. So I do remember going off to the bank. They said, you're a hard growth technology company with no balance sheet, so we can't really lend in to you. And B, remember, this is NatWest Bank, and NatWest Bank at this point didn't have any money. So they said, what you need is some venture capital. So that took us into raising £1 million of venture capital, which was a whole big process. And eventually, I think after about 6-9 months, we did a deal with a firm called Altitude Partners, where these two guys invested in us, and that was really great. One of the funny things was that we, like I said, I then went back to HP as part of the deal, and I said, got the investment now, got the money, you'd like to write your check, all the rest of it. And they said, Mr. Gradwell, you put your checkbook away. We, HP, in our internal bank, HP Bank of Ireland, will now lend you the $2 million that you need at a 1% interest rate over 5 years with an asset finance agreement, so you can have the servers that you need. And I remember thinking, you miserable people, why didn't you do that last week? Because I've just given away 30% of my company and raised £1 million of venture capital with all the effort and lawyers and accountants and everything that involves. And they said, well, the problem was that last week you weren't bankable, but this week you're backed by a venture capitalist and you've got equity, and you're a good credit risk now. So I ended the week £2 million in debt rather than £1 million in debt. But we got the infrastructure, then we got the people, and that definitely helped. Although there was then the whole problem of finding the right people and kind of growing, and we definitely had a number of big bumps in the road in terms of trying to find senior managers, so sales managers, and kind of other operating people. That was very difficult to find the right fit, I think, culturally.
Picking both those items up in turn here, when we're talking about the finance, you often hear stories of people who have a business, need money, but can't get access to that money. And what you've just described there is fundamentally the business is the same. Your business hasn't changed from 1 week to next. You're still providing the same product and service, and you still have a need for this increase in infrastructure to provide and improve the business and the product going forward. Day one, in this case, HV's bank, you couldn't get finance for the products, but some investors come along, put £1 million in the business bank account, and now they will lend you that money. But the business hasn't changed in its fundamental offering and the profitability of the business. It's a very unfortunate situation that some people may find themselves in, and like picking up from you, really frustrating. You can kind of put yourself on the other side of the fence and think, well, if it all goes to Pete Tong, we know there's a million quid sitting there that we can draw on.
Yeah, and they've gone through due diligence and they've checked it out right, and they someone else has put a vote of confidence into you, so that all helps the bureaucrats who, But yes, it is.
The looking at the building up the team, every business book you'll read, every business guru will always say, build up a strong, good senior management team around you. Transitioning from the being the one at the top, making all the decisions and doing everything, to then delegating that level of responsibility to people who won't have the same opinions or views as yourself, will do things differently for right or wrong, whichever way it is. How much of the challenges could be down to just they are different, and how many of whether it be conflicts or just difficulty from yourself to literally just downright just the wrong people.
Yeah, I think building a team is really hard. It's got to be one of the most difficult thing in building the company, I reckon. And we had gone from a situation where we had fundamentally grown organically with people, and everyone had grown up through the company that started junior and ended up senior. So now a situation where we kind of wanted to put the growth on accelerate, and we put the growth on steroids, and we wanted to have people, let's call them professionals, who had done this before, and we wanted to take their playbook and run that. And so, and I think the first issue was that yes, lots of people have a good playbook, but if they've done it in a different way or a different company, then they need to re-engineer quite a lot of the way your company works to fit their playbook, and that's quite painful. And actually, if it doesn't work out for some reason, like you said, whether they're bad people or the product's not going to work in their playbook, right? One of the things about our business was it was a large number of people spending a very small amount of money, so it's quite a retail focused thing. So if you get someone that's quite good at enterprise sales, then the ticket price wasn't high enough. So the amount of effort you have to put into selling doesn't add up to the number of products, right? So the economics doesn't work. So we had a lot of problems with that sort of thing, where we get people that were good salespeople, but they were the wrong sort of salespeople. And I do remember one really difficult decision we had. We had a really great sales marketing lady director, and she, in my mind now, when I look back at it, she was going down the right path in terms of understanding why customers were and were not buying and why they were churning, all that sort of stuff. And she had some really good details, very analytical, and was very good at building model. But she was taking forever about it. And ultimately, well, we all got a bit fed up, and the investors particularly got fed up and said it's not working. So unfortunately, she had to leave. But now, yeah, I sort of, that was one of the situations where I was a bit on the fence, because I thought actually we're almost doing the right thing, but not quite at the right speed or in the right way. And now we've got to cut this off and we've got to start again. And it's the problem with like hiring people, right? It takes you 6 months to find them, then it takes a year for them to figure out whether they're good or not, and then it takes another 6 months to replace them. So you've lost 2 years and a huge amount of money and time and energy, and all the people around you are demoralised. And so we had the problem with that lady, and then after 5 or so years, we exited Altitude, and we did a second round of private equity investment. And a part of that process was that I wasn't going to be CEO anymore, so we transitioned me being CEO to CTO, and this other guy came in, and he and I actually didn't gel in the end, and that kind of caused a lot of friction, and so that was quite tricky because in the end, yeah, he left again. But it was a really, if you've got two people at the top of the organization that aren't working together, then that impacts on everybody. And so kind of there was a couple of wilderness years almost as we tried to sort out. The investors weren't happy, and I wasn't happy, and the management weren't happy, and it was all just, it was difficult, right? And I think eventually we kind of got it all back together, and we got a new guy came in with the new investors, and we started growing again. Um, but yeah, getting that senior management team right was hard work.
So, how do you adapt to work in that environment? Obviously, it was a difficult time and it didn't work out. But during that period of time where, in the hierarchy, somebody's in running what effectively is your business, and you have to be in a position where you acknowledge that person's in charge of your business. How do you put yourself in the mindset to work in that environment?
So we talked earlier. I've always been happy to cannibalize something and rebuild it. So I don't have a problem, and never had a problem with saying, because obviously I hired these people, I appointed them into the roles. They're good people. I put time and energy into finding that. I agree with the strategy. Didn't really have a problem with the fact that the gentleman was now the CEO. So it was kind of more later, when then the strategy diverged, really, I suppose, that I then had a problem with it. And I mean, apparently I was quite difficult to deal with at that point, and I wasn't very happy about the whole thing. But I do remember, I can't remember Barry. I had a really great ops director called Barry, who's long standing, and he or someone else, must have told me that when I walked into the office, I had to kind of walk tall and smile and be the leader that I should be, because if I wasn't, then that would affect everyone in the company, and whatever personal problem I had, that was not something that I was not for consumption in the office, right? We had customers to deal with and staff to look after, and big business at that point. So I kind of had to leave it outside, really. Just, but yeah, apparently I was a bit grumpy.
The business continued to grow and evolve, and I don't recall sort of the time frames in this, but moved into mobile, and you exiting Gradwell, or things have happened around that period of time. Walk us up to that point.
Yeah, so we're recording this on the 22nd, and apparently we're now 3 years and 2 days after the original COVID lockdown. But the COVID lockdown for me was A, as a country, we had to deal with the COVID lockdown, but B, about 3 weeks before that, I had just left Gradwell as the business. So I was kind of kicking around at home, wondering what to do. Not really sure about my life, because I just spent 22 years in this doing one thing very intensively, and now I had nothing to do, and I wasn't allowed to go outside. So it was very weird. But to take you through the journey, the second firm, Chiltern, came in. At that point, they took a majority stake in the company, which was great. As you say, we kind of reset the management team, got the business growing again, got things on the straight and narrow. After a couple of years, I think it was about 3 years of working with Chiltern, and things sort of settling into place. Eventually, we all agreed that it might be time for me to go and do something else now. And so I wasn't. So then I found myself sat at home in COVID. But I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I'm not very good at sitting around at home doing nothing. And so the one thing that we'd never got working in the Gradwell business, because that was all about fixed line, was mobile. The irony of a business where I sold phones that sat on people's desks was that I didn't sit behind my desk very much. I always made phone calls on my mobile. So I thought I want to try and crack the mobile thing again. I'd had a few goes before, but never really done it. And I got lucky. I talked about being naturally curious. So I love researching things and annoying people and asking them questions. So I rang up all the people I knew, had lots of video calls. We were all happy sitting at home having video calls, lots of market research. I went back to one guy who I'd tried to work with before and said, you've got an MVNO, and can I kind of wanted a job, really, I suppose. And he said, oh, well, I've had enough of my MVNO. I'm going to sell that business. Oh, close it down or something. It's not making any money. So I said, oh, don't do that, Clive. Give it to me. Give me the MVNO. And so, I think March or the 1st of April of lockdown, I bought this kind of tiny MVNO for a small amount of money, and then spent the rest of the next year fixing it, basically, called IQ Mobile, fixing it, growing the customers, and pivoted to mobile.
The rolling backs for a moment, before sort of coming back onto sort of what the innovation in mobile is, it can't be easy because you named your business after your own name. Sort of stepping down from that. An example I think of is Bannatyne. He's sort of like, Bannatyne Gyms. He's like, I put my name to this. You put your name to it, and effectively it's sold on, and somebody else is running that. And I believe you're still a shareholder and sort of involved in the business, but the not going there every day, is that a fond memory, or is it something that's feels a little bit sad?
I think it's several people told me I shouldn't use my name to start my next company, which I have not done. And I've often wondered, as you say, what does Lord Sainsbury feel? But I think, it is a bit sad. I mean, there's an agreement in place, right? If they ever stop using the name, I get it back, particularly the domain name. But it's fair to say that when I was 19, I started this company. I didn't really think about that. I called it Gradwell because that's what I was called. And why wouldn't I? And they're a good business. So I'm quite happy that they live up to the high standards of the name. But equally, there was a building in the centre of Bath with my name on it and a car parking space. And my daughter doesn't really understand why I'm not allowed to park there anymore. So I think it is, it swings and roundabouts. But luckily the Gradwell business has carried on growing and is a good business. So yes, there's no disagreement between us about the use of the name. But I think, probably because not all of us get to be either Sainsbury's or Ballantyne's. Probably it's something that entrepreneurs should avoid doing, is using their own name, because the journey is not forever, and therefore there will always be a change at some point.
But there is a part of it that you've just said the business is growing and is doing well, and delivering a good product, good service, and holding up high standards. It's a legacy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hugely proud of the number of people that we employed and have grown. And actually, what's really cool is seeing the people where they are now in their jobs and things. Where they might well have been, junior software developers and Gradwell stuff, but now they're senior product managers in big companies and things like that. So lots of people have done that, and also lots of customers have gone on to do much better things than I have done. There was 20,000-30,000 customers. I regret I can't remember all the names, but I do keep finding people that were original customers and now they're doing X, and that's really cool. See, it made a big difference.
And something that you wanted to get into being mobile, and being the kind of forward thinker that you are, and sort of looking for unique solutions and shaking things up. What are you doing within mobile then? What are you shaking up?
So the big question is really, how do you connect the mobile and make it part of the original business phone system, so that in this new world where we are all out and about and we don't stand still, you kind of want to have that seamless telephony on the mobile phone and part of the SIM card. And the other thing is that people want more coverage. There's no shortage of people in this country who would like better coverage. So we're building 5G networks as well. And hopefully eventually we can get the two things to gel together, so that in your farm or your industrial site or whatever you're doing, you can build your own mobile network in your own community, and then you can obviously have your SIM card and you can connect those different things together. So we have this 5G mobile network business called Telet, and then we have the SIM cards and stuff. So hopefully we can get to a situation where people can have their own mobile coverage, and their phone will be also then connected to their business, so that regardless of how they are out and about, they kind of can carry on receiving those phone calls and orders and processing and all the rest of it from their customers.
So so we're on a industrial estate here that's right out in the countryside. It's an ex-farm that, in fact, I think the landlord still does do some farming, but a lot of the old buildings here have been converted into offices. I'm picturing in my head, if I'm interpreting where you're taking this, is there is effectively a mobile receiver, transmitter. I don't know the industry, so excuse my ignorance, but a big aerial or an aerial, something can.
Well, I think so the interesting thing is that you don't have enough. You probably there will be a big tower somewhere nearby, right? But there are not enough big towers, and as a nation, we don't want more big towers because they're ugly and they, you know. And the other problem with the UK is that big towers tend to beam the coverage over the top of a lot of things, and we have quite undulating countryside. So lots of people end up in dips or, as you say, in farms. So they don't have good quality coverage. And then the problem that your farmer will have is that you might want to upgrade to a new self-driving combine harvester, but what he will find is the combine harvester needs to be connected, and he'll get to, the coverage is patchy, so he'll set off fine, and then he'll get halfway down the field and he'll lose signal, and then what happens to the combine harvester, right? It can't, communicate back to the mothership. So the farmer needs guaranteed coverage across his field, and he needs to know that it's exactly in the right place. The people in the industrial site, with the lovely brick walls and all the rest of it, they want some sort of Wi-Fi like, little small cells to go into the building to give them coverage in all the places they want coverage. And then we also need to cover the forecourt and all the other bits and pieces in the shop and the rest of it. So, and you can't ring up the big four mobile operators today and buy mobile coverage like that. There's some solutions for 5-star hotels and stadiums and things, but not for small business.
So effectively here, we would literally have I'm thinking like mobile phone. I walk in, I'm on Vodafone, for example. So there is no coverage.
So you want Vodafone signal inside?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I don't care who the signal is. I just want to be able to make and receive a phone call. So we pull into this estate, and literally as we're coming down into the estate, we lose the Vodafone signal. So what you're looking at is a solution, what you provide, where you come into this estate and then I have a signal and continue to use my phone within this estate here, as with anybody else. And then when I drive off and back, I'm back on the main network. Am I picking that up correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, today the big four operators would say, well, the solution for this is Wi-Fi calling, but it's hard to have pervasive Wi-Fi. It's in buildings you can just about manage it now, but if you're dealing with the outside use cases, then that's quite difficult. So over big areas. So definitely it's about allowing you to deploy your own small mobile network, because your particular use case in your industrial estate is not big enough to warrant a massive investment from all four operators. Okay, but it is important for you, and you want to you could put up a small investment to solve your problem.
So sidetracking slightly, Vodafone, if you're watching this podcast, the Peter here has a solution, and O2 and everybody else that can piggyback on. Is that where you're taking your business?
Yeah, we're working towards exactly something we call it neutral host, some operators are more enthusiastic than others, but we'd obviously love to work with all of them.
That sounds pretty cool. I like that. You've had quite a journey. You've obviously had great inspiration from your parents, great work ethic that set you on a really good path. And then you've gone through different challenges of growing pains within your business, whether it's bringing management team in or investors in, raising finance, and constantly innovating and looking at how to grow the business. The fascinating story. What I'd like to do, if we sort of move to sort of wind up here, there's a number of, out of everything you've been through, what would be the sort of big takeaways that you would give to somebody at the start of that journey, the younger version of yourself, to be aware of, or mistakes not to make, perhaps, as they've sort of starting off?
Yeah, so there's two things that I was involved in, a thing called the Executive Foundation, which kind of was like CEO mentoring and taught me a lot. It was my MBA, but the practical one. And the guy there, Mike, showed me, we're having a conversation about people and the team and how it grew, and he showed me a thing which was the stages of a company as a bell-shaped curve, and as you grew up, it's this, you can Google, I think it's called PAEI. So and it's the different stages, and so when you get to 5 people, you have the company dynamic will be like this. 10 people, the company dynamic will be like this. 50, 100, 300, and so on. And that was quite helpful, because actually it was quite accurate, and I thought, and I've seen it works for lots of different companies, and knowing what it will be like at the next hurdle was quite good, because you could do that, and then you think, oh, actually it's like this, and I've got a plan, and I could be a bit more prepared for the different phases of company growth and team dynamics and all the rest of it. So that was good. And the other one he showed me was the reservoir of goodwill, which was an actual picture of a reservoir, which is all the things the management team pour in at the top, and then all the reasons why employees and all the goodwill leaks out at the bottom. And of course, managers never fix the problems that the employees are dealing with, do we? So knowing visually how to keep the reservoir full was quite important. And then I think the economic thing and the money thing would be to try and grow the business organically, but to make sure you have a cash flow positive business, so that you don't end up needing kind of equity and equity partners. And probably I think my reflection is that it would have been okay to take a little bit longer, and need less cash than it would be to try and do it too quickly. So I think the more you can do with banks, and with cash, positive cash flow, and so I'm not adverse now this time around to charging customers up front for longer and bigger setup fees and the rest of it, because the more self-sustaining you can make your business, then as the entrepreneur, the more you're in control of it, and the longer you can keep your personal journey going, right? So that's the thing you need to do, is not to lose control too quickly.
I think that last one is why so often everybody harps the same hymn sheet in cash is king, and it doesn't matter how profitable the business looks on paper. As soon as cash runs out, the business is gone. It's quite there's a reason that's everybody refers back to looking after the cash flow. The name of the podcast is Drive. And one of the sort of big things I'd always love to ask as well is, you've built, grown, exited, come out of a business, and now you're starting something else again. You're starting at almost at the ground level again, which some would say is a little bit psychotic. Why on earth would you put yourself through that again? So what is your drive? Why do you do it?
Well, there's paying the bills, of course, and keeping the children going with their baked beans and things like that. But I also, I mean, I'm not very good at sitting still, so I like solving problems for people and making those things better. I like helping people. So I think and I like technology, right? I'm sat here looking at lots of technology. So I can't help myself from sort of fiddling with technology and going, well, how could we apply this differently or better? That's, I think, and if you can do that and you can create something out of it, which then creates jobs and employment and keeps customers happy, I think that's like really worthwhile. So that's sort of what I really like doing.
I'm going to pry on that a little bit more, because you could argue you could get a job at Google and do the same sort of thing. So what motivates you to do it yourself?
Yeah, I think that's then an issue about freedom, and control. And I don't want to be I don't particularly like other people telling me what I should do. Particularly in the workspace, it's kind of, I like to be creative and I like to be able to define the path, and I like to be accountable for the results, not the hours of the day. So that's all of those things kind of mix up together, right? To say, well, actually, I'm gonna do it myself. And when I started the original Gradwell business, there was no risk involved. I was a student. I didn't have didn't need much money. I didn't have much money, and this time round, obviously, I've got mortgage and family now, so it's kind of, it has been more of a commitment, but equally we've gone out and we've kind of got some better backers and things. So again, the risk has been managed, and therefore I think it's about. I would never encourage anyone to kind of jump completely off the cliff and start a company, but I know for me, getting a job at Google was not the right thing to do. So I've kind of tried to start companies and create my own space in a managed way.
No, that's fantastic. And again, just want to. I've been aware of Gradwell. I've been aware of yourself right back from my very first business in the 90s. We were in a similar space, and I did look at what you was doing in Aura and think, how's he doing that and that stuff. And you are somebody I've observed from afar, if I may. So again, it's been great hearing your story. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Thank you for being on the podcast, and I wish you every success in your new venture.
Thank you. And I think it's really important to stress that all entrepreneurs are good at being swans. So you're graceful on the top, and then it's like utter panic underneath. But as long as you can deliver and look like a swan, then that's all that matters. So it's been really good chatting to you, Richard. Thank you.
Absolutely. Amen. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. Please remember to hit subscribe and like. It really helps us with the algorithms for YouTube, and I'll look forward to bringing you more interviews in the next episode of Drive, the small business podcast from UKBF.